Okay. So as the feedback is typed, I'll start. Hi, this is Sriram. Everybody can hear me. Audible. So hi, this is Sriram. So I've been with ThoughtWorks for past 3 years. I'm a QA here. That's about me. So today I'm going to talk about techniques and tricks in using locators. So how many of you are using Selenium? So most of you know what is locators. For others, so this is the agenda. First, we will look what locators are actually, then different types of locators. Then I will be concentrating more on CSS selectors and XPath. Then there's a demo on how I actually find what locator to use. And there's one more demo wherein I show which locator is actually more efficient, which we should be using. So this is the agenda overall. So what actually are locators? So for Selenium, so as a user, I'm doing a manual testing. So I want to click on a button. I can see with my eyes that button is there. I can click on it. But how does Selenium actually know that it has to click on that button? So that's where the locators come in. So locators help tools like Selenium to identify an element on the page. So suppose say in a page there are 2 buttons. So which button to click actually? So locators come in there. We give Selenium the argument that this is the locator you should be doing action with. So Selenium can click, it can get text. So on what element it should perform? Actually, the action the Selenium should perform is defined by the locators. So we'll go into details. I think it will be more clear. You can stop me when you have questions. You will not wait till the end. So these are the different type of locators we have. ID. So any element is uniquely identified by an attribute called ID. So there's a div in the page. It has an ID. So mostly there will be no duplicate ID. So ID has to be unique. So ID is the best thing to use. So if you have an ID, go ahead and use ID. That's recommendation. Then name, there can be an attribute called name for that element. Then link text. So WebDriver supports I can act on a link. So there's a link on the whole page. I can say driver.find element by.link text. So just the text of that link would identify that element. Would be identified by the driver. So partial link text is also there. You can take a part of that link. So suppose say click here is the text in the whole page. I can just say driver.find element by.partial link text click. So it will look for the links wherein the click text is present, and it will do an action on that. Then tag name. I was speaking div. So div is a tag name. So span, image. So it can act on that. We will go ahead and we will go into details there. So class name is an attribute. So every element can have an attribute called class. So this need not be unique. So where do class actually come in is, so suppose say I want to apply a style, specific style. So let's say there's an error text which I want to give color red. So I would specify for all the error text, the class has error text, and in CSS I would say wherever the class error text is there, apply the font of color red. So whichever element I mark as error text as its class attribute, all those elements would be highlighted in red. Similarly, there are more. So the next part is CSS selector. So I was talking about CSS selector, right? We will go into detail in the next part. So these are the locators, different locators that Selenium currently supports. Any questions here? So let's look what actually is a CSS selector. As I just told you, so developers have to apply some CSS styling on particular text. How would they do that is they would pick elements with a specific attribute. So let's say I want to this is the same example again, the error text example again. Okay, so I want, so let's say the now showing and pre-book. Let's say these are two texts. Now showing and pre-book, these two texts, I want to highlight it in, suppose say green color. So I would specify a specific class attribute. So for these attributes, so let's say for this A tag, I say a class equal to something, link. Let's say class equal to link. Similarly for the pre-book as well, I will say class equal to link. CSS styling, I would say dot link font color to be red. So this is how CSS selectors actually work. I apply CSS using these selectors. So this is CSS selector. We'll go into examples. So similarly, there is XPath. So XPath, it identifies an element by passing through a document structure. So from HTML body, div, so it passes through the whole structure. Now let's see an example. So I have drawn a simple tree here. HTML tag, then a body tag. The body has three divs. A div has a div and an A tag with image. So that div tag has an attribute called class equal to banner. So this div tag has an ID equal to banner. This A tag has attributes href, and href has some value. And there is another div with table. So there is a table as well. So this is a simple tree structure we will be passing through. So let's see how I can identify an element. So yeah. So class attribute for an element, you have a class attribute called banner. So how do I identify an element with a class attribute? So we use dot. So here, if you see driver.find element by.css selector dot banner. So dot is an operator to select class in CSS. Similarly, if I have to write an XPath //div because it's a div tag at class equal to banner. So this is how I will write an XPath. So what all it would identify is that div. So the driver would identify that div and do action on that. So it would do a click on get text, whatever I do, it will do action on that particular tag, particular element. Class name will not be distinct. So since I am using a find element, it will take the first occurrence. If I am doing find elements, it will take all the occurrence and save it into a list of them. Next is the ID attribute. So ID attribute is unique, should be unique. So if I say by dot, so hash is the equivalent of ID. So I would use hash. If I want to use ID attribute, I would say driver.find element by.css selector hash barrel. And similarly,
same ID.
the same case again. So if it is a find element, it would select the first occurrence. It will not be first occurrence. But it's a general practice that ID would be. So similarly, XPath //div, it is an attribute at ID equal to banner. So div. So what I'm saying is find a div which is having an attribute ID with value banner. So it would identify this div and do an action on that. Next, we can identify element by its type. So you see here, I'm saying div. So I am doing a driver.find elements here. I.XPath //div. So what it would give me is a list of web element with all the divs. So here one slash means, so in XPath I can, so XPath is generally into two types, absolute and relative XPath. So absolute XPath is I start from HTML slash body slash div. It is an absolute XPath. So if I want to escape, I don't want to pass through HTML then body. So I say double slash. So it escapes everything and it matches all the rest of it. So slash div is all the divs. That is relative XPath. Doubts? Related to my, so this is related to my div. So I can say in this example of ID, so I actually want to do action on the A tag. I want to do a click on A, okay? So slash, but the unique attribute is available only with the div. So I will say slash div at ID equal to banner slash A. So my anchor tag is with reference to that div tag. So it's a relative expression. Yeah. Parent and child element. So I can identify, so the same thing which we were talking about. I can identify a parent element, say TR, with its unique attribute, but I don't want to perform action on this tag, but on its child tag. So what I would do is TR in CSS selector I would do a greater than TD. And in XPath slash TR slash TD. So it will identify all my TDs. Questions, notes, specific TD. Yeah. So suppose say the first, you want the first element. You come here. You come here. So I have an example I will do. So I can identify an element with its attribute. So I want to identify an element having href as its attribute. So I will do a square bracket of href. It will give me all the tags having attribute href. It will give me that. So similarly for XPath, so star means any tag. I'm not looking for a specific div or a specific anchor tag. It could be any with a div having an href attribute. It's not there, but just hypothetically, div having an href attribute, it will also identify that. So star means anything. It is an anything, right? It's not specific tag. So slash star at href. Any element having an href attribute. So similarly, I can do with an attribute value starts with. So I use this operator in CSS, href, wherever the attribute starts with, value starts with in. So my attribute value starts with in, so it will identify that attribute. Similarly, in XPath, I will say starts with. Similarly, there's an ends with, so this identifies this anchor tag. Then value ends with is also there. So I would use a dollar of favicon. So so my attribute value ends with favicon. So I say ends with at href favicon. It identifies that anchor tag. And yeah. So then again there is a contains. So in between the value, I can say book my show. So book my show is a value having in between there. So I say at href star equal to book my show. So I can use star for beginning as well as for end. So I say star in, it will identify that. So but it will, so suppose this href is having book by show dot in. It will identify that as well because it contains, it's not starts with a contains. So similarly for XPath this is contains. So your question, identifying a specific child. So let's say I want to identify only the second TD. So I would say TD nth child of 2. So it would give me whichever TD is the second child of its parent. So here if you say this TD and this TD, these are second child of this TR. So it will specifically identify TD of 2.
child start with 0, 1, 2,
1, 2. Starts with 1. So it identifies key. Questions. So specifically, if I want to identify only this key, is it recommended to give the index there? Yeah. I'm sorry. Recommended to give the values there. Yeah. If you want to specifically identify this element, then you don't have any other attribute. So you have to do this. Or you can ask your developer to put a class attribute and use that. Or what else you can do is, I would say driver.find elements tr. Then it gives me a list of web element. From there I pick the second element. You can do that as well. So I have a demo. So let's see how I actually do a find and CSS selector on an XPath. So we all have a console in our web application. So let's say I want to select this show times. So what do you think I would use? Sorry. Yeah. So visible at the back. So I want to select this show times. What if there, but there's no ID? Just a minute. Yeah. So this is my anchor tag having href value as /10 / show times. So what do you think would be my CSS selector? But what I would do is I want, so let's see what happens. I say contains. So in console I can do $of /ahref. So contains is star, right? So I'm using ahrefs. I say only Chennai, not show times. So give me all anchor tags that contains a text called Chennai in its href attribute. So it gives me lot of attributes, lot of a tags. So there are around 34 anchor tags in the whole page. Thus, it does not solve my purpose. What would I do next? So I can go to the parent and see if there is something, some attribute there. So hide for small or active is the one. Active is not good because only when I have clicked on show times that active attribute will be this type. So I uniquely identify this. I would say dot hide for small and space in this. So what does this say is it's visible at the back. No. So what it is saying is find the element with class having hide for small and the immediate child is anchor tag with the href attribute having value as change. So it gives me now only two elements. So I have my choices are now smaller. So I go again and I say top bar section is one class. I do this. Again two So here I should do now. Now I am not able to do this, so I will say nth child. So if you see here, nth child, I will do it. I think I cannot do this, so I will have to do this. I have to have take it into a web elements and get the first element. So I first have to store it into a web elements list of web elements, then get the first element. So similarly, if I have to check for XPath, what I would do is $x. $x stands for XPath. So I would say /start and class equal to so I get two sections. Inside this section, I have height for small class attribute. So I say /li at class. So if you see, what I've done is given a slash, so it says no elements because it is not an immediate child. So in this structure, if you see, my section tag is here. Inside that there's an UL, then it's an LI. So that's why my single slash does not work. So how I would do this is I will take a second slash. So what you can very well do is copy XPath. It gives you a whole of this. This is the absolute XPath. So there are a lot of tools available for Firefox, like Firebug, Firepath, so Firefinder. So these helps you in finding XPaths. But I prefer writing XPath on my own. So it gives me two LI tags now. So this is one. Any questions here?
So actually, through XMAP as well as through CSS, we are able to identify a particular element in the web page.
Yes.
Which one is advisable considering the performance of the
Yeah, I have a demo for that as well. So advisable is first if you have an ID attribute. Suppose say you have an ID attribute for an element, and go for it. Because it will be uniquely identified, it will just directly get and run it. So let me show you one demo here. So I have what my program does is so there is a testing bot which gives me lot of browsers, so IE, Chrome, Firefox. So I am running my script of finding an element using CSS selector, XPath, ID, as well as absolute and relative XPath. So my program finds an element. So if you see here, stopwatch.start. Before I find an element, I am starting my stopwatch. After finding, I am stopping it. Then I get the elapsed time. So it runs across Chrome, IE, and Firefox. Let's run it. See what happens. So by running this, actually I have already taken out a sample output. put it into an Excel. So if you see for Pro, I think the chart will help you visualize better. It's visible at the back. No? How is it visible? So if I zoom in, you will not be able to compare. That's why. So first, my relative XPath has run against Chrome, then CSS selector against Chrome, ID against Chrome, and absolute XPath. The first 4 bars are against Chrome. So it's relative XPath, CSS selector, ID, and absolute XPath. So if you see, ID takes the least amount of time, then CSS selector, then relative XPath, and absolute XPath. So similarly, I have run it against Firefox as well. Firefox gives me different results. ID less than amount of time, relative XPath that's second, then CSS selector, then the absolute XPath. IE, if you see, IE is the most. I don't know why ID took this much time. CSS selector. So in IE, CSS selector takes a huge amount of time. If you are running your scripts against IE, I would not advise you running using CSS selector. So it depends on the browser which you are running, and depends on the selector. So this is what I have for today. Any doubts?
Any reason why I use it? Actually, even though the rendering that happens, let's take now. If you're going to go with CSS, yes, go with Chrome or Firefox and do manual testing. But if you are going to use XPath, then
more than what we usually use 5 lakhs.
which is coming up to
You don't have any.
framework coming up to solve the issue common to all. From their own framework.
I think it's different way because you're going to the road is not a problem. It's actually it's all processes.
One thing you asked, is it advisable to use the end? So it is definitely it is the last resort because the disadvantage is if you use the index like end index. When there's a new row or new button inserted, it takes maintenance cost of such this. So if you don't have any other option, you can't talk to developers because that is definitely, especially if you have Excel like that's what a lot of Excel things in software applications and tables. Okay, you can do it. Yeah, so if that is one way, but again, if it's 200 or something, so you have a way and do a quantity. It's 1,000 things. You do console. And then better thing is
So I'll be around these functions.